and welcome. Okay, great. Okay, so I think we can get started. A very warm welcome to everyone who's joining us today. A warm welcome to all our viewers. My name is Pamela Marwisa. I'm from an organization called Transformation Team. So our purpose as an organization is to enable people to find meaning and well-being in life. So if you're someone who's looking for meaning and purpose in life, and you'd like to be well in a holistic way, mentally, physically, emotionally, please visit our website or our Facebook page to find out more about our programs and what we do as an organization. Okay, so today my topic is on gender-based violence, and because this is quite a broad term, I'm just going to be focusing on domestic violence or intimate partner violence. And the reason why I chose this topic is because I believe this is a topical issue at the moment. And for those of you who have been following the news and social media, I'm sure you've heard that there's been a surge or an increase in the cases of domestic violence ever since the lockdown. And this is at a global level. So it's now, like a pandemic, almost like COVID-19. So it's now a pandemic. There's been an increase in cases of domestic violence ever since the lockdown. And so we want to just look at why this is happening and what can the victim do. So just to kick off, I thought I'll just start by defining what is gender-based violence so that we're all on the same page. So gender-based violence is violence that is directed against a person because of their gender. And I just want to acknowledge that, yes, both men and women do experience gender-based violence, but it has been widely acknowledged that most gender-based violence is inflicted on women and girls by men. So studies have shown that over 3/4 of the victims of gender-based violence are actually women. So there are various forms of gender-based violence, such as female genital mutilation, forced marriage, sex-based harassment. But today I'm just going to be focusing on on domestic violence, which is just one form of gender-based violence. Okay, so I thought it was also important, so also maybe just to define what is domestic violence so that we're on the same page. So domestic violence is also known as intimate partner violence, and it occurs between people in an intimate relationship, and it can take many forms, which includes emotional, sexual, physical abuse, and threats of abuse. So please note that even threats of abuse, it's also regarded as a form of domestic violence. And it has been widely recognized that in abusive relationships always involved an imbalance of power and control. So usually the abuser uses intimidating or hurtful words and behavior to control his or her partner. So the gist behind an abusive relationship is always about control. And I'm just going to share with you some global statistics on gender-based violence. And ladies and gentlemen, the numbers are staggering. So gender-based violence is now a global pandemic. And it has been acknowledged that it now affects 1 in 3 women. It will affect 1 in 3 women in their lifetime. And 35% of women worldwide have experienced either physical or sexual intimate partner violence. And 35%, I believe, that is very concerning. It's quite a large number. And globally, as many as 38% of murders of women are committed by an intimate partner. This is quite disturbing. And 200 million women have experienced female genital mutilation or cutting. Can you imagine? 200 million women the world over have experienced female genital mutilation or cutting. Again, this is very disturbing. Okay, and let's bring it closer to home. Some local statistics. So in Zimbabwe, 1 in 3 women aged between 15 to 49 have experienced physical violence. And about 1 in 5 women have experienced sexual violence since the age of 15, usually by their intimate partner. Again, I think this is quite disturbing. And the Women's Coalition of Zimbabwe says the COVID-19 lockdown period has seen a surge in gender-based violence, and they have recorded 764 cases. And these figures were taken, about 2 weeks into lockdown. And now, we've had we're almost into the end of our second month since lockdown. So I believe those figures are also escalating. So let's look at the link between domestic violence and lockdown. Many of you might be wondering, what's the relationship between lockdowns and domestic violence? Is there a correlation? What's the link? Why the sudden surge? So according to statistics released by the United Nations, globally it has been reported that cases of domestic violence rose by a third in the week after lockdown was put in place. So this is on a global level. So everywhere, in all the continents, in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, there's been a surge in the cases of domestic violence. And, it's also just a cause of concern, and we may be wondering why the sudden surge. So some studies have shown that violence against women has increased during this lockdown period due to an escalation of tensions in the home. And so, yes, I guess it's understandable that, when people are forced to stay at home against their will, tensions are bound to build. There are a lot of negative emotions going around. And, I believe there's also a lot of anxiety in people's minds, whether they be, people are anxious whether there'll be pay cuts. A lot of people are afraid of losing their jobs, and many have actually lost their jobs. And people are worried about whether they'll be able to pay their bills, whether they'll be able to pay their school fees. And yes, I understand that emotions, are high, and but unfortunately, in a patriarchal society, and which is most societies, men find women and children as easy targets for venting their anger, or displacing their anger. And as a counselor, I always say, emotions are neutral. We're all in this together. Nobody likes to be in this lockdown. And, emotions are neutral. They're neither good nor bad. So anger is just a sign that you have a blocked goal somewhere. And, we all have had our goals blocked. I mean, some of us used to like going to the gym. Some of us used to like to go to watch soccer or to play sports, and all our goals are blocked. Some people like to, to go clubbing, or play golf. And yes, all of us, our goals have been blocked. But, there is always a constructive way to deal with your anger or your negative emotion. So violence is never acceptable. Violence is a no-no. It's not acceptable to displace your anger in a destructive way. So I always say, find the emotion is not the problem. Find constructive ways of dealing with your anger. For example, for the men and even the women, when you're angry, this is the time to go out into the garden. Go out there and dig. Yes, it's a constructive way of dealing with anger. Or for the men, go up on the roof and start cleaning the gutters. And for the ladies, this is the time to do your spring cleaning. If you're angry, go and open those cupboards and start cleaning. And go and take down those curtains that you've always wanted to wash and start washing. So the emotion is never the problem. It's what you do with the emotion that can be constructive or destructive. So please, I encourage people to stay away from violence. So now let's look at how to recognize domestic violence. So you could be in an abusive relationship and probably are not aware of it. So how do you recognize domestic violence? So you might be experiencing domestic violence if you are in a relationship with someone who calls you names, they insult you, they put you down, they prevent or discourage you from going to work, or school, or seeing family members or friends. If your partner tries to control where you go, what medicines you take, what you wear, or makes you account for every cent that you spend, those are red flags. Or if they act jealous or possessive or constantly accuse you of being unfaithful, and yet you know very well that you have not been unfaithful. Another red flag is, if your partner gets angry after drinking alcohol or using drugs, and they vent out their anger on you. And if your partner threatens you with violence or a weapon, if your partner hits, kicks, shoves, slaps, or chokes you, or if they hurt your children or your pets, that is domestic violence. If your partner forces you to have sex or engage in sexual acts against your will, if they blame you for his or her violent behavior or tell you that you deserve it, those are all signs of domestic violence. So why are we talking about domestic violence? What's the big deal? Why are we even discussing it? One of the reasons why I'm raising the subject is also, because to raise awareness, and also because domestic violence has a lot of negative effects. There are a lot of negative effects, negative impacts that come with domestic violence. So I'll look at the physical effects at first. Domestic violence always has physical effects. So there will be bruises. If you are in a violent relationship, there will be bruises everywhere, bruises around the eyes, red or purple marks at the neck. You can end up with sprained or broken wrists, chronic fatigue, broken bones, gynecological injuries. If you're pregnant, it can lead to pregnancy complications. You could end up with sexually transmitted disease or back pain. Ladies and gentlemen, the list is endless. So there are physical effects to domestic violence. And also, the domestic violence has psychological effects. So it does lead to depression. Domestic violence can lead to depression. It can lead to suicidal behavior. It can lead to anxiety. A lot of women may end up, or victims, end up with low self-esteem. They are unable to trust. There's fear of intimacy. You are unable to concentrate. And it can also lead to post-traumatic stress disorder, where you are constantly having flashbacks. It can actually result in alcohol and drug abuse. You may never have thought that you'd find yourself where you are in a place where you are abusing drugs or alcohol, but with domestic violence, you can actually end up finding yourself there. And domestic violence also has spiritual effects. So it leads to hopelessness, just a feeling that, life is meaningless, it's hopeless. Can lead to feelings of unworthy, just feeling that you're not worth much because you're constantly being abused. It can lead to inability to trust, and you can end up questioning and doubting your spiritual faith. Like, where's God? Where's God when I need him the most? It can also make you unmotivated, such that you don't even have the energy to pursue your goals or your potential. And the other reason why we're raising awareness on domestic violence is because it also affects the children. It has a negative impact on the children and, everyone else who's living in that household. So in children, it can result in psychological trauma. It actually traumatizes children, and it can lead to poor concentration. The child cannot concentrate at school. It can also lead to aggression and disobedience. So, some children, they're aggressive when they're at school, and sometimes you wonder where this is coming from. It can also lead to anxiety in children and also depression. Did you know that children actually also get depressed? And it can result in children who have low self-esteem and who are just withdrawn because, there's always violence at home, there's always drama at home. So children can end up actually with low self-esteem and they become withdrawn. So if you're a victim and you find yourself, or you can relate to most of those things that I've been saying, what can the victim do? What can the victim do? Okay, let's look at some of the things that a victim can do. I think the first thing, is to be able to recognize the cycle of abuse and to recognize even the signs of abuse. So we talk about a cycle of abuse. So usually there is the tension building phase where tensions increase and the abuser threatens violence. And then there's an incident phase where the abuser strikes. And then there's the reconciliation phase where the abuser apologizes, they promise to change and offer gifts. And by the way, they always apologize, eh? They always promise to change. And then you go into the calm phase or the honeymoon phase. And this is the phase where there's calm and there are peaceful times in the relationship. So you tend to relax and you're off your guard. You think, okay, everything, is back to normal. But unfortunately, the cycle always repeats itself. And I just want to emphasize that abuse will often escalate. It can become more frequent and severe over time if it is left unchallenged. So, disrespect increases as the victim becomes more and more compliant. So, doing nothing is never an option. Doing nothing is never an option. So, I'll encourage the victims, to take action. Do not remain silent. Do not just keep quiet. So what can the victim do? What else can the victim do? Always have practical plans for safety. Practical plans for safety need to be implemented. So you need to make safety your number one priority. I always say use your right of life, because you can see from those statistics that 38% of women, they die due to domestic violence. So please do not become another statistics. Always make safety your number one priority. So always have a bag packed with important things in case you need to leave quickly for emergencies. Always have a bag packed, somewhere. Always make sure there's money or airtime in your phone, and always make sure that you have money for emergencies in case you need to leave quickly. And another thing that you can do is always ensure that a friend or a neighbor knows about the abuse in case you need to call them. Have someone that you can confide in, whom you can call, when you are in such a crisis, to say, okay, it has started again, so that they know how to act quickly. And one important thing, please seek professional counseling. If you're a victim of domestic violence, please seek professional counseling and also seek legal help. And, finally, I just want to say, if you're a victim of domestic violence, please do not suffer in silence. Help is available. Seek professional counseling, seek professional legal help. Thank you.